Hello guys, and welcome to another um, tutorial video on Codeigniter 4. This is in this tutorial video we're going to be looking at how to add assets. We'll be looking at how to add JavaScript assets, primarily the JQuery framework. We'll also be looking at how to add Bootstrap and images to your file and how to use them inside your views. To start off, we will start by running the project. So in my case, I'm running the sample folder. So I right click on it. I'm going to open a new terminal in the folder, and I'm going to run the command php spark serve. If you're on Windows, remember you have to navigate to czamp htdocs, or whichever place you had stored your file. This means that you need to have your XAMPP server started and the Apache server and MySQL server started. In this case, we're going to only be using Apache server, but you can also have your MySQL server running also. So once I have this, you can see that the URL is localhost 8080. I will go back to my browser, which I had opened, and I'll type localhost 8080, which should give us the same project folder or same view as what we had last time. And if you remember, when we ran /auth index, then we had the login page, which when I click on process login, it takes me to the user homepage. Now we'll start by creating a few folders which will allow us to store some files. So we have two ways of primarily adding resources. One of them is by use of the CDN or online resources, and the second way is by use of local resources or storing them locally. Now, for things like profile photos, images that you may need to access locally, then you do store them locally. Things like Bootstrap, you can store them locally, or you can use a CDN, whichever is applicable to you. Things like jQuery, you may want to have a local copy, but things like your JavaScript files, your local CSS files, then you may want to have them locally. Now, what I'm going to do, I have the project folder open in Visual Studio Code. If you look at the Explorer folder, you notice that, or the Explorer window, you notice that we have the project folder, which in my case is sample. We have the app window. Below it, we have the public. You can have, depending on whether you install it using Composer, you could either have system or vendor, right? Well, whichever is applicable. Now inside folder, inside the public folder, you have a number of files. So we have the index.php, which is primarily the first file that is being called. You have robots.txt, which allows you to specify which to allow the Google search crawlers or SEO crawlers to be able to get the files. So it will crawl through this section and get the details about your project. You have the icon. This is the Codeigniter icon, and we have the htaccess. htaccess is a file that allows us to be able to rewrite URLs. We will be looking at it in more detail at a later time. So what I'm more interested in is you need to create 3 folders inside the public folder. So right click on it and say new folder. The first one is going to be CSS. So we're going to be storing all our CSS files here. Create a new folder inside again public. The second one is going to be JS for JavaScript. So all our JavaScript will be placed in that folder. And the last one is going to be images. So we can either have it as, let's say it as images. Now, inside the CSS, so inside of each of these files, we're going to be storing individual files. So the first thing we want to do is we want to download an image and store it here and see how we can be able to display it on the user's homepage. Now, what I will be using is a website called Unsplash. Unsplash is a website that gives you royalty-free images, but with some attribution. So in case you want to attribute in case you download an image that is high resolution, then you can give some attribution to the user or to the creator of the file and have them, give them the proper rights. So I'm going to pick a file an image at random. I'm just trying to see which one looks good. Well, it doesn't really matter, but so I'll take this image here. I will right click on it and I will say save image as. I will navigate to where my folder is and in my case I have it here, then I will save it as one.jpg, right? So you can give it whichever name that you want. I will look for another image. I want to get another image. This looks interesting, so let me save it again. Again, note that I'm in the same folder. I'll save it as 2.jpg. So we have different image formats. You can have PNG, which can be used for transparency. You have GIF, which can be used for a few second animations. But in my case, JPG works well, so I'll use JPG. Once you have that, you will navigate back again to your file. Now in this case, we can see that in our Explorer window, we have 1.jpg, which is available, and you can see it here, and 2. So you need to confirm that the image is actually showing properly. I will close that folder, and I will go to my app folder, select views, select auth. Remember, we want to go to the home page, which is where we are currently. If you look at the browser, you'll notice that we're in the home page. So we have, this is the user's home page. Welcome Tom Peter. So I want to open the home page, and we can see that we have, this is the user's home page, and we have welcome Tom Peter. Now at the end of it, just below that, let me just zoom in a bit. Just below this PHP code snippet, I'm going to add an image source here. So I'm going to say image source. You always need to give an alternate keyword. So I can say this is an abstract image from splash.com. So you can give it whatever text you want. Now, the source is going to be, we're going to have a PHP snippet that will be basically echoing out some base URL. Now the base URL here, if you don't know where we have configured it, if you look at app config and you select the app.php, you'll see that we have a base URL that has been configured. Where is it? Yes, base URL that has been configured here, and you can see it's localhost 8080. If your file is different, then you're using a different port, then you could specify a different value here. All right. So when you say base URL, we're invoking this localhost localhost port 8080 / and then we will add something inside the base URL. Now, because we are interested in using, inside the public we have CSS images, so we have images. I will put here as in single quotation marks. Remember, here we have double quotation marks, so we'll say single quotation marks here, and we'll say images / 1.jpg. Right, so make sure you save it. Now when you go to the browser and reload, you'll see that our image does appear. It does appear. We will be modifying it with CSS a bit in a few minutes. We can also add another image. So in fact here we could just simply have a break tag first to make sure the image goes on the next line so that Tom Peter appears first. And then we can add a second image. So image source images 2.jpg. Make sure there is a semicolon there and that you've closed the PHP tag. So then we have it here. Alternate text. What was the image about? So snow-capped mountain. So here we can say it's a snow-capped mountain from unsplash.com. Now the reason we have this alternate text is that you want to be able to give the user it's a way of giving the user some ability to know what the images you're loading, and if you're using a text, or if you're using your website supports people who do not have, or who have visual challenges, then it could have that on-text reader or on-screen reader read the alternate text for them so that they can know what the website looks like. All right, so we can add a break tag before. Oops, I have made this wrong. All right, so if I do that, then you notice that we have our two images loading, but then the size of the images is quite, it's too big. Yeah, so we may want to reduce the size of the image, and we can do this by use of CSS. Now, CSS allows us to be able to modify the text or components in a web page to make them look better. So we can add them anywhere. Primarily, we normally add them as a style tag or a style attribute inside the header. So we can add them here, and then we can modify them later. So what I'm going to do is we want to modify image. So everything that is an image, we want to make sure that the width is, let's say, 100%. We can work with 100%. The height, we can give it a fixed height limit of in pixels. So you can say maybe 250 pixels. Let's see what that has. You can see that the width is a bit stretched, so we can reduce and say maybe instead of 100% of the page, we can have 30% of the page, which should be able to have this a bit better. Of course, you can reduce it to a level that you feel is comfortable, and I think 20% works well. Yeah, so you can have the 20%. So you can have 20% there. Now, ordinarily, you may want to have this same styling applied across different pages. So what we can do is we can actually add a CSS styling across. So we can create a new file inside CSS folder, in a public folder. So inside public CSS, we can call it main, or let's call it styles.css, and we can simply move our image. So everything, the image tag and the styling here, we can move it to the styles of CSS, and instead of linking it here, instead of adding it here, we can use the link tag where we can say link href is equals to, and we'll put a reference. We'll say this is a style sheet. Now, I'm using a tool called Tab9 that allows me to have all those autocomplete features. So here I'm going to, inside the reference, I'm going to have the base URL. So I'm going to have the opening PHP tag. I'm going to echo the base URL, and I'm going to close the closing PHP tag. Inside here, I'm going to add CSS/styles. Is it style or styles? Styles.css. All right. Now with this, we should still have the same exact look inside our file, because what I've essentially done is I have added the CSS, which is this one, that has the image tag. In fact, we can actually also change, let's say we can also change the text in heading 1 to be a different color. So I can say heading 1 color, and I can say it's red. All right. So you can see that by doing that, we have modified the file, and you can see that the color here becomes red. Now, you could also add a few elements. So you can decide you may want to have a few elements from other tools like Bootstrap. So what we can do here is the images. We can have the images inside a div. So we can move them all inside a div. Of course, we will indent them properly so that we have, and we can give the div a specific ID. So we can give the div ID and say images div. Above it, we can have a button. And you can say toggle image show, right? And you can give it the we can say images toggle btn. We will be modifying this so that we see, of course, this needs to be complete. What will happen? So I'm just going to add a break tag. Now the idea is this. Let me just highlight what I'm intending on doing. When I click on this button, image show, I will be adding some Bootstrap a bit later. I want us to be able to have this div collapse. When I click on it again, the div should appear. And we're going to do this based on what we call JavaScript. And we'll be using a library called JQuery to do this for us. Now I've gone ahead and opened up JQuery. So you can search for jquery.com on your browser. And you can select download. Now, what we normally, we have two ways of adding jQuery. The first way is having a CDN, which allows you to simply have the jQuery online. The second way is by clicking on either of these production jQuery elements. For example, the compressed jQuery 3.6 as by the time of this recording, and simply doing a Control-S to save the file. Now I'm going to navigate and have this inside JS, and I'm going to rename this to jQuery.min.js. The min here stands for minified version, so it has been minified and compressed to make sure that it's as tiny as possible. Now, if you look at your JS folder now, you should be able to see jQuery.min.js, and I'm going to add my own file, main.js. So we normally need to have your jQuery. If you're using jQuery and you're going to have your minified, your main file. Of course, your main file is not going to be minified, but if you minify it later on, we have some online tools for that. Then you can say main.min.js. Now, inside here, the rule of thumb is that we normally add jQuery, that is a library, at the top part of the pages and anything else at the bottom part of the pages to avoid the page breaking. So here we can have a script. We're going to have script type is JavaScript. And you're going to have a source. So you're going to say the source attribute is going to be from PHP. We're going to have that. So just to make sure we are correct. So here we have the script type is text JavaScript. The source is going to be the opening PHP tag, the closing PHP tag, and you're going to have the same way we've been adding the CSS. We're going to add here jQuery.min.js. Now this applies to any library that you're going to be adding, not necessarily jQuery alone. Yeah. Now when you do that, we're going to add, we're going to have a second script tag here. Of course, we'll first define it here, then we can define it later on in other elements. Now, as you can see, there's already a hint that I'm being given. I don't know if I have GitHub. I'm also using GitHub Pilot. So GitHub Pilot is a tool that allows us to have it allows you to have code auto completion. Yeah. So in my case, it gives me code, and I can be able to give it comments. If you're interested in that, then I can do a short tutorial on that also at a later time. So with jQuery, you can have the format document, which is essentially this document, this page, the web page. Now, we are going to have a function that we're defining here. So I'm going to say document, so $ document in parentheses, .ready. So when this document has loaded fully, we're going to run this function, and we're using an anonymous function here to define that, to to have this self-invoke. Now what do we want to do? When I click a button, so let's make sure that the JavaScript is running by alerting JS works. Okay, so we want to see that this JavaScript works. So I'd expect when I reload the page, I get an alert, that's a pop-up that says JS works, which indicates that this jQuery library has been added successfully, and that this script tag here, which is always at the bottom of the page, has worked correctly. Then we can now come, and when we toggle this, when we click on this image, it should hide and show the images div on demand. So I'll go back to my home page and reload, and you can see we have this JavaScript works pop up, then everything works. So that means the JavaScript is fully loaded. Now I want us to simply toggle this, and how do you go about it? I'm going to use the $, and I will use, now jQuery allows us to have, in fact I can just have it autocomplete for me. We can, the same way we have the document as the $, we're using the DOM, which is the document object model. We can target a given ID by use of this sharp sign. So we had the ID images div, and we can have, and we have the other ID images toggle button, which is a button. So we can have the two different images. So what we're saying is we want when I click the button, which has the ID images toggle button, I want it to, when we click run this anonymous function that toggles between hide, so we have a function called hide, and we have a function called show, which are both in jQuery. And when you toggle, if it's hidden, then it shows. If it's not hidden, then it hides. So this will allow you to have both the toggle. So it allows you to run the function that is supported by jQuery. So when you click on the button, then it will run this function, which is an anonymous function here, and it essentially simply plays between hiding and showing, depending on which is currently active. So we can run this. Okay, so far nothing happens. When I click on it, you can see it hides everything, it shows everything. And if you wanted to go and see more details about this, then you can see the API documentation of hide. So let me just search hide here on jQuery. Sorry for that. Hide. Yeah. So you can have the documentation for hide, which is a bit more detailed, and of course you can give some specific, you can add. What we're interested in is toggle. I don't know. You can see how toggle works, and you can give. You can have some more functionalities beyond what we've just shown that you can play around with. So you can make it slow. So for example, you can add some few details, and we have even some examples on how this can work. So yeah, so you can look around the documentation for it to see how it works. But then you notice something very interesting. In fact, for now, we can actually move this JavaScript file. So remember we had created a new JavaScript file. So here we can move this from document.ready into our main.js and paste it here. So you can just cut it from our script tag here. And because we are removing it, we can simply add a source attribute and say that the source is going to be, we're going to have this script from js main.js. So we're going to have this JavaScript run from the main.js library file. And again, if you click on toggle, you can see that it works still the same. Now to the last bit, we can add Bootstrap. So Bootstrap will rely on a number of things. And for this case, we're going to be adding based on the CDN. So I'm going just to copy the CSS. So if you go to get bootstrap .com, you should be able to get started. You see this file and you can use it. I normally prefer using it from the CDN, which allows me to simply copy this and paste it at the top of the file. So in this case, I will have, it's normally good to have the Bootstrap file before your own Java CSS file, so that you have your CSS being the last element that is being run. Then you can add the bundle for Bootstrap. However, if you needed to add it separately, then you can add it differently. So you can click on copy or rather we can just use the bundle. Yeah, let's use the bundle. I hope it doesn't interfere, so we'll add it below the jQuery. I hope this will not interfere with our JavaScript. We can confirm by running our JavaScript and seeing if it has any issues. And you can see already immediately some CSS styling has been applied by virtue of simply adding the Bootstrap. Now I'm going to add one more line of code. So I'm going to say I'm going to add a class, and I'm going to add a class for button, which makes this a button, and I'm going to add a button primary. And if you go to the Bootstrap website, you should be able to see the different components, and you can see from buttons we have the different button elements. So primary means that it's going to be blue in color. So when I reload this, you can see that it is already blue in color, and this is a simple way of adding some advanced, without doing too much work. Then you already have some detailed your page coming up properly without doing too much work. And as you can see, we have very nice details by having Bootstrap, by having some bit of JavaScript, and you're able to add a few images here and there. So this episode has become a bit long, so we'll stop there. I will cover the other parts of forms and other elements that use Bootstrap at a later tutorial episode. If you like the video, you can leave a like. If you have any questions, you can leave the questions in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, you can subscribe, and don't forget to share with your friends. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Until next time, see you. Bye-bye.